Episode number 230, Pastoring Communicators and Creatives with Ben Stapley. Part 2. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, thanks for hanging out this week. This week on the show, we will wrap my conversation up with my friend Ben Stapley, all about how to pastor communicators and creatives. And this week, we're going to give you practical steps on how to pastor in, as well as some other things. And so we want you to realize how to take care of yourself so that you can pastor others well. So we're going to jump right back to my interview with Ben to kick things off this week. Here we go. All right, let's round this out. So tell me about asking to be spiritually acknowledged.
So this is fun, right? So we can sometimes give ourselves a spiritual pecking order for church employees, and we'll put on the top, we'll go through the top to the bottom. On the top, it's the lead pastor. Maybe you got the associate. You got small groups pastor, family. Then you might have your admin staff, janitorial. And on the very bottom, he might have the communicators and the creatives. Oh, they come into work late. They stay up late. They sometimes they watch R-rated movies. As research. So whatever it is, we can sometimes decry them and say, hey, they're a little less spiritual than the rest of us, which is a false notion on a number of levels. Jesus picked fishermen, right? He didn't look for seminary degrees. He didn't look for a professional religious type to be his disciples. He looked for tradesmen and tradeswomen to move his ministry forward. So we're all aware of that. But this is the other thing I flag, is that these people, these communicators and creatives, can oftentimes make twice as much in the marketplace as they do in the church.
Yeah.
And so they are self-sacrificially saying, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to forego a higher salary because I love Jesus so much. And so I'm not trying to say they're the highest on the pecking order, but I'm saying the ground is level here. Let's not confuse ourselves and say that some staff members are more spiritual or love Jesus more just because of their role and their title. They might be because that's their walk, but as groups of people, we can't categorize people that way. And sometimes it feels like, as a creative and a communicator in a church, that you're doing it, but you're not as spiritual. And so I always encourage people, if you're wired that way, as a leader, as you're pastoring these people down, let them know the spiritual significance of what they're doing. So, hey, that social media post was great. We anticipate more people are going to come to Christ this Christmas season because of that. Your copy had no spelling mistakes. It was distraction-free. And because of that, you've got everyone's eye on the prize, which is, again, Jesus. Thank you for doing that, for using so it's just making sure that you're able to spiritually to praise these people, not just for their art and the art itself, but the outcome, not just the art, but the outcome. What you're doing is pointing more people to Christ. Thank you for being spiritually engaged here. That goes a long way for creatives and communicators.
I've used this approach for volunteers as well. So one piece that I say is compliment 3 times more than you critique.
Yes.
So I think it matters to hear praise and not just criticism all the time. So if I can consciously say, be in a mindset of encourage, and then when I come around with the critique, it might not be taken so harshly if it's couched so much in encouragement.
As a leader and as a manager, I've heard it said, and this is very convicting because it hits me between the eyes, that if I was to walk down the hallway and I saw you, and say, hey, Carl, do you mind if I have a second for you? How would people respond intuitively? Would they say, I would love to. Does any conversation with Ben is value add? I know I'm going to be celebrated. Primarily, I'm going to get some coaching and then maybe some critique. Or would they go, ugh, this guy or gal wants to talk to me. Ergo, I know it's something I've done wrong. Mm-hmm. And if I do a gut check, I think for myself, it's more the latter. That, do you mind if we talk? It's not celebration. It's not praise, because
Right.
I inverse those things. And so that's something that hits between the eyes, because I know
Right.
I'm not there yet.
Good. All right, get me into pastoring down.
Yeah, so you alluded to this already. Whatever we want for ourselves, we need to be willing to give to others. So this is for staff that you might manage, but more importantly, it's because there's a bigger pool of people. It's for the volunteers that you oversee as well. How to make sure that they are receiving these same course corrections, so they don't burn out. Because burnout is just not just for staff. Burnout is a reality for creative and communication volunteers as well. The first thing I say is give them opportunities to fail. So we all do our best work when we have some margin for failure, some area to do that, right? We all know that, hey, Google, they gave staff X amount of percentage of their time to just to do R&D, trial and error, to test things out and to do things that weren't on their job description. That's true for all employees. It's even higher for creatives and communicators. They find the majority of their best work through trial and error. So you have to give them those venues. Now, I always just kind of pump the brakes here, because you have some, LPs or XPs saying, wait, is the service going to be a trial and error? So you need to give them those areas, but then you need to give them clear areas that they can do that. So, okay,
Right.
Our Easter service is not going to be trial and error. But there's upcoming youth retreat, and the youth pastor is up for anything, and we'll try any idea that's out there. Why don't we throw some of those creative ideas that we want to do maybe in the service experience? Let's beta test them at the youth retreat. There's an area to fail. Staff meetings. Staff meetings are, Christ Fellowship Miami, once a week we have a 90-minute all-staff gathering. And for us, we get a chance to try out a lot of in-service elements there, because we know, hey, it's staff. And if it's not a home run, they're not gonna ding us on it. They're gonna be a lot more gracious. So give them those opportunities, and then give them a demarcation where they can swing and miss, and where they need to swing and hit the fences.
Good.
It's the first thing I'd say. Yeah. The second thing is giving them clear and consistent feedback language. I'm sure you get this working with a lot of clients at 1230 Media, where they give you feedback on a piece, and it's not clear. Is it actionable, or is it just a suggestion? So I've always worked with that when I've received praise from a client. Are you just brainstorming ideas and spitballing things, or do you really need this to get changed? So I use clear language with them, where it's I'm going to give you instruction. This is something that needs to be changed. It's objectively wrong. There's a typo on page 2, or it's more subjective, and it's a suggestion. Hey, take it or leave it. This color, I would have gone for a pale blue instead of a teal blue. It's just a suggestion. Take it or leave it. And then making sure those that's clear between those two aspects of feedback is super helpful. And then some of the other things we talked about, praising them as well. And then I always give notes. So this isn't something actionable now, but it's for the future. So you know what? The talent you selected for this video wasn't very energetic. Down the road, if it's going to be a hype video, we need to have somebody who can hype something. At this point, it's too little too late. You captured it. We don't have time to go back, but down the road, be aware that you need to choose talent to reflect the emotion and energy of the video. So that, I don't know about you, but I'd love to hear your feedback. I found that super helpful for just speeding up the feedback process instead of all these subjective things back and forth.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with us, so this has happened in the church. It's also happened with dealing with clients. I think some of the worst feedback is like, nah, something else. Just not giving any thing up front, and then when received, it's, nah, I don't like it, something else. So maybe a note to leadership to say, get us in the ballpark as a creative. If you're doing a series on whatever, and you have in your mind, if you're doing Jonah and you really want to see a whale, then tell us that you want to see a whale, and so we can go. So don't get 3 or 4 rounds of revisions deep and say, well, what I was thinking since the beginning was I really wanted to see a whale. Well, why didn't you tell me that 3 rounds ago? So if you can help the creative on the front end, that's helpful if possible. Have you run into that?
Yeah, a lot. And I guess I was even working with the assumption that that's the starting point before you even get to the feedback process, that a clear objective that what we're trying to do. And then with a client, the client, you say the client, but the lead, whoever's making the credit request in the church I'll always try to ask up front, do you have a clear vision of what you want? Or do you want us to help you clarify your vision? Because sometimes, I'm sure you've done this before, there is a clear vision from the client and the lead pastor, whoever's making the request, but they soft sell it. And I'm looking for Jonah, maybe a fish metaphor. I'm not entirely sure. And then the creative team runs with it and say, he said maybe fish, but wouldn't it be cool if we used a donkey? And then they go rabbit trailing, and you bring it back to them, and they just weren't explicit with saying, no, I know exactly what I want. It's this huge fish, and we see Jonah, and we see him in the belly. And so just being clear on that. Like, do you have a clear vision, or are you asking us to help clarify your vision? And then we kind of know where we are in the process. That helps tremendously up front.
That's good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So give particular praise. Tell me about that one.
So I was at a church, and this is stuck. It's 20 years ago, and it's clearly stuck with me because I can know it off the top of my head. I was at a church in Chicago, close to the theatrical district, and we had a lot of actors. We had a lot of actors on our volunteer team who acted professionally. So we had incredible spoken word and monologues and sketches, all that stuff. And a guy did a piece. It was particularly riveting, and I connected with him in the green room afterwards, and I told him, hey, great job. And he looked at me and said, at what? And I was tongue-tied, and I hadn't thought it through, and I said, at everything? And he looked me square in the eyes, and he said, generic praise means nothing, but particular praise means everything. And that stuck with me ever since. And he said, you saw me, but you weren't actually watching me. You weren't actually paying attention. He's like, great job. That means nothing to me. And I would say that applies to all communication, creative, artistic disciplines. Hey, good job. Good job at what? That doesn't mean anything. Give particular praise. And so find something that you actually liked about that. And this is the challenge, or maybe not the challenge, the encouragement I give to people. You don't necessarily need to know everything about their artistic discipline to do this. I was recently interacting with a graphic design team, and they had a great lower third, and it had some elements that were branching out of it, and it made it 3-dimensional. And I just said, I don't know how you're doing that, but I'm drawn into that because it isn't static, it isn't boring. And I wasn't using the right vernacular, and I wasn't speaking exactly the way they speak, but they understood what I meant, and they appreciated me reaching across the aisle and trying to speak into what they did well. And you could, the shoulders went back. You could see them receiving that instead of just, good job. No, I picked out something in particular that they did well. And that means the world to anybody in these fields.
Tell me about how sometimes you take the ideas of someone else. So their ideas are better than your ideas.
Yeah. So if you're trying to pastor down, sometimes you can come in, at least, these are all things that I've wrestled with over the years. And so I got a feeling some of these people listening are wrestling with these as well, where I can come into a brainstorming meeting or a pitch meeting, and I can come in with my idea. And because I think my idea is great, we're going to run with it. Even if your idea is good, I think mine is better enough that we're going to run with it. But I encourage, I've learned this lesson over years, that if my idea is great and their idea is good, choose their good idea. A couple reasons, right? It's still a little subjective. An idea is, how do we evaluate one idea versus another? That's a pretty subjective art form. I'm going to be a little biased because it's my idea, and so I automatically think it's better. But here's the most important thing. If you let them run with their good idea, they're going to execute it way better than your great idea because it's theirs. They're excited for it. They've been thinking about it for a long time. They're going to have personal buy-in to make sure it gets across the finish line. So if somebody comes, lead pastors, executive pastors, and they present a good idea, but you have a great one, take their good idea again and again. The only caveat I have is, it's got to be good compared to great. If they come in with a mediocre or a poor idea, then you can't take that. But as much as you can release people to their ideas, they're going to win, they're going to thrive, and that idea is going to blow you out of the water, and it's going to be way better than what you initially brought to the table. So take theirs. And then the last thing in terms of So the last thing in terms of the pastoring down is I encourage the side hustle. So this is kind of sacred ground for a lot of churches that, hey, we can't encourage a side hustle. We can't even allow a side hustle. And so I know there might be some people listening at this point saying, I disagree, but I would encourage it for a lot of different reasons. In the past, I've heard it said this way before, that for a boomer or even a Gen X, that the organization kind of owned you. That, hey, you're here for the next 20 to 30 years. At the end, we're going to reward you and give you a great retirement. Those days are gone. Those days are long gone. And millennials and the younger are entering and have been in the workplace for a long time, and they come in with a high degree of skepticism that you are not going to take care of them as an organization, and that they need to take care of themselves. And because of that, the organization doesn't own them. The organization is renting them. And the faster leaders can adopt this mindset, the longer they're going to have that younger staff on staff. It's funny. I was talking with a church recently up in Canada from where I'm at. I was coaching the lead pastor there and talking about this and saying, hey, on average right now, that millennial is staying at their workplace for 3.5 years. And I was trying to say we need some things to do to keep them longer. And I was saying, hey, look, if we hit 7 years, that's great. And he was saying he felt defeated. He said 7 years, and they're going to bounce. That's where the bar is. And I said, that's twice as long as the marketplace right now. If you hit 7 years, that's a huge success. So I come at it that way. 3.5 years, if I can double that, that's a win. Anything beyond that is extra. That's the cherry on the topic. But that's the goal I'm aiming for. What's the average in the marketplace? And can we double that as a church and keep these people plugged in longer? To do that is to allow side hustles. So people going outside of their regular job and getting additional income as well. There's some caveats that I give. I'd say there's probably some additional benefits there that you receive. So these people, obviously, when they go, they're blossoming somewhere else. They're bringing that back with them when they come back in. It's probably something that's similar to their craft. So if they're a musician, they might side gig and do weddings. If it's a graphic designer, they might be working for the local donut shop down the street and making their graphic, whatever it is. They have marketable skills that as they use them outside the workplace, they're going to bring in that expertise back with them and make the church, make your organization better. So allow that. The two caveats I give is for myself, as I do side hustles, like lead people to where you're at, is first of all, make sure you crush it here before you crush it there. So I should not be side hustling anywhere if I'm not, first of all, doing a phenomenal job and getting high on my performance reviews year over year in my organization. If I'm not, then I shouldn't be spending all this additional time somewhere else.
Right.
And then the second thing is when you're here, you're here. So when I'm, my work hours, I'm in the office, or I'm working from home, that there's not a doubt with who I report to or anyone on staff that I'm fully present. So you shouldn't be able to look over my shoulder when I'm working for the organization and see, hey, are you working on your blog post? What's that I see on your screen? There shouldn't be a whiff of that. If so, it really compromises your authenticity and your ability to do this. But if you do those two things, I completely encourage side hustles to double the duration of my staff to stay.
Two questions. One, even if it's in the same field, so I can design for the church and I can design for someone else. I can make videos for the church and I can make videos for someone else, even if it's in the same field.
Yeah, so for sure, because I would say those are skills that are going to come back into the workplace and get better. I would say that it's cross discipline, but I'd say it's got more benefit if I'm a videographer and I'm doing weddings on the side. Because you know what, I learned about the Dutch angle. Oh, it's when I do this. I'm going to bring that back into the workplace now, and a lot of my videos are going to have more energy because they're tilted on their side. The other caveat here, so I want to give any. It's like kind of me personally. I'd like to hear you bring that up. I'm sure there's a tension for you. That is an attention for me. The other tension I didn't mention is compensation. Where oftentimes our heart follows the money. So if your side hustle becomes your predominant income generating, your revenue generation for you personally, your heart's going to naturally go there as well. So I'm upfront with that with my leadership. I ask my direct reports as well that, hey, if this thing blossoms on the side, that's great. Just let's have this conversation and be upfront about it so I know where it's going. Because if it becomes your major income, then you're going to naturally want to go where that's at. And I understand that. Let's just not be surprised by it, you or me, as you continue to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's my safeguard. Why are you at least pushing in onto the similar discipline? Why'd you bring that up? I'm curious.
This has been my experience, and I've seen others struggle with this very thing as well in church world, that churches will be very hesitant to allow side hustles if they find out, one, it's either the same field, or two, they're making money on the side hustle. So you mentioned both. So you mentioned the compensation as well. So I've had my own experience with this, and then I've talked to a lot of other creatives, especially in the church, that it's getting more and more common. Like the churches can't stop it as much anymore. But years ago, and I've been in this for a long time. So years ago, it could have been seen as something bad to have a side hustle, or no, we're not going to allow that kind of thing. So, yeah. All right. So get us into. Go ahead. What?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you can't stop it. You're right. And so, like that false notion of coming back to a different generation's perspective of the employee, that I own you and you cannot do anything that I don't say. That isn't true, and that has never been true. Right. We're just more aware of it because of social media now. And right. I would much rather my direct reports being upfront with me. Hey, this weekend, there's an extreme sport thing going, and I'm taking photos for them. That's awesome. I can't wait to hear what you learned from that this coming weekend. Way to go. That's incredible. And to see it on their social media feed, and for them to not have to sulk and pretend it's not happening, or to live this duplicit life, like that reeks of unhealth to me in an organization and in an individual. And so whatever we have to do to stop pretending is a healthy and a positive thing. I don't know if my solutions are necessarily the right ones or the ones lined up, but I know those days of pretending. Gosh, if the church can't be a place where you can be honest, where can we do that? I come into the light. We found freedom in the light. And then if the lead pastor struggles with that sense of, I don't own this person, Jesus has bought this person, they ultimately report to him. I think that's a different situation. But the era of doing things on the DL, I just think is very unhealthy and toxic, and the church needs to figure out how to break that.
And I think as leadership, the fastest way that you could probably alienate a millennial, especially, or creative, is to use that ownership language. Well, you're supposed to be everything that I'm going to push back on that. I'm going to go, woo-hoo, time out. No, you don't. Now I'm going to kill it when I'm here, and I'm going to give it all I got when I'm here. But you don't own my time elsewhere. So, especially if I'm taking a pay cut for ministry and I'm doing a side hustle to support my family even more, so that I can, still work in ministry also, Anyway.
Yes. And I think there's a difference between, you can ask an employee to be all in. That's like language that we use around at Christ Fellowship. Hey, are you all in here? Do you bleed CF? Are you passionate about what's going on? But it doesn't mean you are only about Christ Fellowship, or this is all you are about. You are all in here, and there are other dimensions of who you are. And I want to know that, and I want to celebrate that. So I think that's a false dichotomy, that you can't be all in here and have something additionally. So I'm just
very
however
true.
I can break that.
Very true. Yeah, that language of all in is interesting to me. I've wrestled with that before, because there is that tension of all in means you do nothing else but us. Like, no, I can be all in with the mission. I can be 100% on board with the mission and also do other things too. Cool. All right, get us into the last section, pastoring in. This is more self care. This is more about pastoring ourselves, right?
Yeah. And I'll say this as well. All your watchers and your listeners are going to struggle in one of these three areas predominantly. Cards on the table, this is mine. So this is, how do I take care of myself? I was, recently, my wife and I, we end of the year, we kind of do like a personal year-end evaluation. Hey, what would we have changed differently? How do we want to see 2020 look different than 2019? And like one of the things for me was just continued additional boundaries with professional and personal life. And and she's a counselor. She's kind of pushing into that. Like, why is that? What's driving you there? And it's it's a false notion that all of my identity comes from my work and from my profession. And that's why when I'm at the table eating meals, she can see that I'm physically there, but I'm solving problems for somewhere else. And I know for myself, though, I need to pastor in more, and I need to have those boundaries. Some of the ways that I've learned to do that over the years, first one is I strive for excellence and not perfection. So this is another code phrase in the church world that you've probably heard. Mm-hmm. We strive for excellence. We say that, but what we've meant in the past, or what we could have meant in the past, is we strive for perfection. We strive for excellence, and we do not accept anything less than perfection. And if you do, you might be on the way out. And so I am clear that there's only one source of my perfection, and that's my Savior. He stands as my perfection. I'm going to start to preach here. He's my perfection. My work is not my perfection. My organization is not my perfection. My local church is not that. I'll still strive for excellence, but it will not become a God. It's been a God in the church world for a while, and we need to break that. And so that's something I do. I take heart as well. This is a story I like to say in relationship to Peter Jackson. I don't know if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. I thought that trilogy was great. The Hobbit, I can take it or leave it, but the original trilogy, he nailed it. And an interviewer was talking to him and said, "Hey, you've committed 10 years of your life, critically acclaimed, publicly acclaimed. Everyone loves it. Did you get it right? Did you get it perfect?" And he said, "You never get it perfect. You just run out of time." And if he's able to say that after spending a decade of his life on an artistic artifact, then we, on our newsletters and our graphic designs and our social media posts within the church, need to be able to accept that as well. It's not going to get perfect. We're just going to run out of time. And having that as a framework helps give me some sanity, and then the sanity of the people that I'm trying to lead. Yeah.
So, second note on this is, don't start something until you have someone. What do you mean by that?
So, oftentimes in the church world, we are playing that comparison and competitive game. Who's the bigger boy or the bigger girl down the street? And how can we be like them? So we're oftentimes trying to start initiatives that we don't have the bandwidth to see through. And so you talked about being the one-man show, right, at a church. Mm-hmm. Smaller or mid-sized churches, you may be full-time, you may be part-time, you might be voluntold to do these things. And well, guess what? There's always going to be more artistic disciplines. So, hey, there was the written word, and then there was the photo, and there was the video. There's always new artistic disciplines coming, additional ones. And there's also additional communication channels. So at first it was just satisfying as a church to have a newsletter or a bulletin. And then it was a website, and then it was a Facebook page. Now you need to have all the platforms, and if you don't, you're a Luddite and you're a dinosaur. And so with that in mind, it is tempting to be the single guy or the single girl to take all that weight on your shoulders. And I know it was for myself. I was in a church environment like that where for about 8 years, I was the only staff member that oversaw this stuff. And I just kept on taking more and more and more until I was getting to that burnout phase. And I had that conversation with my lead pastor. I said, you know what? We're going to take a step back. I want to take a step back now to ultimately take 2 or 3 steps forward. And this thing you want me to do, or this thing that we have been doing, we've been taking photos for every one of our major events and then posting them. You know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to stop personally doing that for the next 6 months, for the next 3 months, whatever it is. And I'm going to spend that time recruiting volunteers and building up a volunteer base. And then after I found them and I trained them and I released them and I coached them, then we're going to be able to capture more events because it's no longer on my shoulders. I'm not the doer, I'm the leader, I'm the recruiter. And so coming back to that phrase, don't start something new until you have someone to do it, to have that volunteer or that volunteer team to overdo it. Or you're just going to keep on adding and adding and getting burnt out and burnt out. So I found that helpful, especially whatever size. Even larger churches, you don't have endless money. There's always new things you want to do. Whatever size church you are, this applies to all churches across the board. You might say, "Oh, the big churches don't." All churches struggle with this, so don't start it until you have the person.
Okay, so let's wrap this section, and this is the biggest problem that we initially started talking about, and that is some people can leave the job, leave the church, but some people are leaving their Savior because they're not dealing with these pastoring issues. So tell me how we always can leave the job, but we should never leave the Savior.
Yeah. So some people are probably listening, and they're probably burnt out. They might be fried, and they're saying, "Yeah, as I've been listening to this, I've been job searching at the same time, and I'm looking to bounce." And I'm not telling everybody they need to stay, or I'm not advocating for that. Sometimes there's situations that are toxic that you need to leave, but the majority of situations are redeemable and fixable and salvageable and could flourish. So if that's the case, I encourage people to push into that. I know for myself, reading different books, Emotional Healthy Leader, going to counseling sessions with counselors that particularly knew how to talk to staff members in that environment. Those have been life-giving for myself. And so as I try to pastor in to keep myself in the game for as long as possible, that's been hugely beneficial. And I encourage people to do that as well. Whatever steps they need to take, that pastoring up, down or in, oftentimes it's in, figure out what that action step is out of this conversation and take it in 2020 so that you're not doing the same insanity any longer.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time. Give me some additional thoughts as we wrap. Give me any kind of final concluding thoughts on this idea of pastoring creatives.
Yeah. The something I found to be helpful, I'll give a story to back it up, is we're ultimately trying to worship the gift giver, not the gift, right? And so I found this helpful for myself, to give myself the bigger perspective, not just the temporal perspective, but the eternal perspective, and to realize that my gifts are going to wane. My ability to perceive and experience and to give coaching and to my imagination will probably diminish as well. And let's dream up this and let's dream up that. That ability for Ben Stapley is going to start to do this over time. And so my gift is going to dissipate. When it does, am I still a robust person? Am I still a full person? Or have I been spending the past lifetime worshiping my gift and not the gift giver? I was in a church environment where I had a sound engineer, and he started to lose his hearing. And when you lose your hearing, you lose the high frequencies first. And so he did construction for 20 years, and so his ears were shot by the end of it. And when feedback came in, that high E pitch, he was the last one to hear it. So everyone else in the audience and the congregation heard it first, and he was the last one before he would bring it down and course correct. And it happened one Sunday. I was like, okay, maybe an anomaly. And then it happened the next Sunday. And I was like, oh, it's a repeat pattern. I might need to have a difficult conversation here. And then the third Sunday, he came up to me before he ran sound, and tears in his eyes. And he said, Ben, this is going to be the last Sunday I can run sound. And I was like, tell me more about it, John. And he said, construction's beat up my ears. I can no longer hear the high frequency. And I know that even though I love this, I no longer have that gift mix to serve the congregation well. And because of that, I'm going to step out and stop serving on this team. I'll find another avenue to serve, but I can't serve in this particular role anymore. And again, at this point, tears are coming down both of our faces. And he said, and to be clear, he goes, the tears are tears of sorrow because I've lost this gift. He said, but they're also tears of joy because I'm still God's son. I'm still adopted into his family. And I still can't wait till I get to heaven and I can hear with crystal clear clarity. And he had the bigger picture. And I was young. I was like 25 when this happened. And I was like, I want to be like you at the end of the day, at the end of the game. When my skills dissipate, I want to be. How do I live my life now so I get there and become like you? You see in that Revelations 5 passage, right? It's people are worshiping around the resurrected Savior. It's a lamb as though it's been slain, and you have living creatures and elders, and you have all nations around. You don't have graphic designers. You don't have social media managers. You don't have videographers. you have who we are in our essence. And so for me, keeping that eternal perspective helps me pastor in. And that's what I encourage everybody to do.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I love that story to end on. And, man, thank you so much for your time. Again, this is something I could talk about with you all day long because, it's all about, it's not about the perfect worship experience. It's not about the perfect design, pushing the buttons correctly. It's all about life change. And if we're not seeing life change happen in our church and also in our staff and volunteers, then the perfect worship experience doesn't matter. And so I love it, man. Thank you so much for your time and your friendship. Appreciate it, man.
Excellent, Carl. Thanks so much for having me here.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey guys, Carl here. I want to tell you about my ebook, Pastor First, 15 Ways to Win the Hearts of Your Volunteers. Pastoring your people is the secret sauce to building a dynamic volunteer culture at your church. You have to care more about who your volunteers are becoming over what they do on your team. In this ebook, I share 15 practical ways to make people your first priority in your tech ministry. From knowing their name and their story, to scheduling intentional time outside of serving, to how to set them up for success, this ebook gives you a practical guide to pastoring your people well. Pick up a copy today at 1230.media/books. You can download it straight to your desktop or your favorite e-reader. I pray the book will give you some steps to show your team that you care more about them than what they do on your team. If you can't tell, the content of today's podcast is very near and dear to my heart. We can have the best worship experience in the world, but if we're not pastoring our people well, then it doesn't matter. So you can hit the button the right way. We can have the best lighting, the best audio, the best video, the best guest experience. But if people's lives aren't being changed, and those are the guests that are coming to our church as well as the people in our church, our volunteers, our staff members, if we're not pastoring everyone well, if we're not loving God and loving people with everything we are, we can have the best worship experience, but it won't matter if we're not doing those things, okay? And I am not perfect at this. This is not something that I'm the end-all, be-all at. This is just a reminder of stuff that we already know. It's all about loving God and loving people. So I want to encourage you to do that. Take the content from today's episode that Ben shared and use it for your church, use it for yourself. Also, you can pick up my Pastor First ebook that gives you 15 practical ways to love on your volunteers and love on the people that you serve. Very, very practical ideas. These aren't things I'm going to blow your mind with, okay? So you can get that book at 1230.media/books. Feel free to pick that up. It's a kind of a green color on the cover. It's got a heart on it with a diamond on it. Pastor First, 15 Ways to Win the Hearts of Your Volunteers. Pick that up today. I've been telling you about our brand new 1230 Media app, and our team is so excited about this. We want you to download it on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Either one, you can pick it up. And we want you to download it and then go into the settings and make sure that the notifications are turned on. We're not going to blow you up. This isn't a spam kind of thing. We want to encourage you. We're going to send you encouraging notes. We're going to pray for you. We're going to send you exclusive deals from our website. We're going to send you the podcast a day early every single week just for having the app on your phone. Okay? So we want to be there for you. We want to come alongside you and encourage you. So 1230 Media, the app, is available now on the App Store and the Google Play Store. So be sure to pick it up. Next week on the show, I welcome my friend James Wassam back to the podcast. Now, James is a master of live audio production. So we're going to really dive into live audio training next week. So if you're in the live environment, if you touch the audio console, if you lead audio volunteers, the next 2 episodes of the podcast is an audio heavy series with James. So we're going to really dive in. He's written a brand new book called Great Live Sound, all about how to have the best sound and best mix in your worship experience that you can possibly have. So if you touch the audio console in any way, shape, or form, this week and next week or next week and the next, rather, are the episodes directly aimed at you. Okay, so be here for that with James. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Again, we can have the best worship experience, but I want to encourage you that life change, it's where it's at. Love God, love people. That's what we want to encourage our congregation, our staff, our volunteers to do. So go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this week so that can happen. I'll see you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.